All right, we are getting back to some standard vlogs, like the VLOG, VLAWG. I guess you could even call it the OG of vlogs. I'm not going to have time to do an actual highly edited, highly stylized vlog between what I have to do this morning and tonight's live stream with Robert Barnes, but there's some stuff I have to get off my chest. First things first, this morning I am going to do a podcast with Pantelis. It'll be the second one we've done together. Pantelis, for those of you who don't know, is a Montreal stand-up comic. He's got a great podcast as well. There he is. Pantelis. Viva! And we're going to talk about what's going on in Canada, eh? Bill C-10. Which is the Liberal government's law, supported by the NDP as well. So there are accomplices to this unconstitutional madness, but it is the Liberal government's attempt to update the Broadcasting Act to have it apply to the interwebs. And for those of you who don't know what the Canada Broadcasting Act is, that was the law that governs the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company. It created the CRTC, which was the Canadian Regulation of Telecommunications, something along those lines. CRTC. Bottom line, the Broadcasting Act created certain requirements for anyone, what were they called, broadcasters on radio and television for their content. It had to be sufficiently Canadian. It had to I can't think of any of the other requirements right now because I can't, but it created a number of stringent requirements for broadcasters to be compliant with the Broadcasting Act, to promote Canadian culture and to employ a number of Canadians if they're doing a Canadian production, etc., etc. You know, government wants to regulate, wants to finance itself. So that was the idea behind the Broadcasting Act. How it's played out now is that with the advent of online streaming and the interwebs, a lot of broadcasting, or what the government wants to consider to be broadcasting, now comes by way of streaming on the interwebs. And so the government wanted to amend the Broadcasting Act to grab up, gobble up, govern the... what's that one that does the streaming thing? Netflix's, I don't know if Hulu is one of the ones that they wanted to target, but basically, you know, the Netflixes of the interwebs, who they want to gobble up into the ambit of this Broadcasting Act so they can impose financial requirements, broadcasting requirements, restrictions, etc. In the midst of proposing this Bill C-10, people were like, well, if this governs the internet, it's going to govern user-generated content, which is content that people like myself and you post on YouTube, Twitter,
Use the right
Facebook.
2 lanes to take exit 70E to merge onto Toronto.
What are you saying, Siri? Anyhow, that people were concerned that by amending the Broadcasting Act to apply to the interwebs, it would apply to user-generated content, users like myself. The Liberal government inserted an exclusion which specifically stipulated that I guess they included an exclusion. The exclusion said that the Bill C-10, which was the act to amend the Broadcasting Act, would specifically exclude user-generated content. And people were sort of satisfied. Until the Liberal government quietly, discreetly, under the cloak of a pandemic, removed the exclusion that they included.
Take the exit.
Siri. They removed the inclusion of the exclusion. So basically, they removed the exclusion that said the Bill C-10, the Act to Amend the Broadcasting Act, would not apply to user-generated content, which means that it could apply to my content, which means that the CRTC can come into my YouTube channel and say, it's not enough Canadian content, or you have to pay certain regulatory fees, or you have to cover more Canadian stuff. And if anyone remembers the Chris Farley classic...
In 2.7 kilometers, take exit 71 onto Route 335 toward Boulevard St. Laurent.
This is not going to work, Siri. Anyhow, so that's the Bill C-10. Now I'm going to go do a podcast with Pantelis. We're going to talk about it. This morning I was on Radio X out of Quebec City talking about how the government has gone over the top and has caused irreparable damage to society.
C'est le résultat nécessaire quand il y a une relation incestueuse entre le gouvernement et les médias.
And that is what this vlog is going to be about this afternoon. Right now, let's go see Pantelis. Booyah! All right, so I'm back from the Pantelis podcast. Radio X this morning. The link will be in the pinned comment. Pantelis podcast, another great one. When that podcast is launched, it should be this evening. I will share the links around social. Right now, I'm waiting in the car while my kid gets ice cream with some friends. And this is the question. What do we do from here? How do we get out of this situation that we're in? What practical recommendations would I have? What would I do differently if I were actually the person in charge? At some point, we are going to need politicians who are going to normalize normalcy, who are going to talk people out of the fear that the previous government has talked them into, conditioned them into over the last year. And I think it's going to have to be a different government because, the person who's been telling you to fear spiders your entire life cannot just come around overnight and say, yeah, now you should not be scared of spiders, or yeah, I was wrong on the spiders, or spiders are not as risky as they once were. We are going to have a trustworthy politician, which might be an oxymoron or an impossibility by its nature. A trustworthy politician who's going to have to bring the collective down from the ledge onto which they have been placed and pushed for the last year. And it's an interesting thing. Like just last night, I was at the Orange Julep. I knew it was going to be busy because it was a beautiful Sunday evening, and the Orange Julep is busy in ordinary times. It's open for food. It's fast food and allowed to serve for takeout, not sit down. All the picnic tables were locked up, whatever. I knew there were going to be a lot of people there because people are dying to get out now. I didn't know there were going to be quite that many people. And I got there, and there were crowds of people arguably not respecting the public health measures for social distancing and wearing face masks outside. And when I complain about face masks outside, parentheses, it is relying on actual scientific studies. There was a study that was reported in the Irish Times that said outdoor transmission of COVID accounts for 1 in 1,000 cases. The CDC just came out and said that they may have not exaggerated, but gotten it wrong on outdoor transmission by a factor of 10. The idea that Quebec still requires outdoor face masking is what it is, but I get there and there's a lot of people not wearing face masks, not social distancing. There's police there, so police can impose the law as they deem fit. And it was amazing to see. And you could see people arriving who were uncomfortable with this. I noticed a group of people who came together. I believe they were double masking as well. And, oh, yes, interfering, yes. What's up?
We're going to go to Hampstead Park, which is right there. So can you just, drive there?
Yes. Close the door. I'll be done in a second.
Okay, we're going to walk.
Okay, see you there. Now she just distracted me. Okay, the people showed up in double masks. And as the evening progressed and as they began to realize that you can take your mask off outside and you don't need to feel this, I'm going to say, trauma-induced fear to double mask outdoors, by the end of the evening, they weren't French kissing strangers, but they had their masks off. And people need to be sensitized to normalcy and talked out of this potentially exaggerated fear that we have been whipped up into over the last year, partially because we didn't know better, but we know better now and we have the stats. And it takes someone trustworthy to do that. And it also takes a practical policy to do that. And it can't be done overnight, but it can't take too long because, the wound can fester. But you imagine that it's come to a point where people are actually afraid of freedom. They are afraid of leaving their house at 9:30 at night because with the incessant radio ads, they have been conditioned to fear being outside of their homes between 9:30 in the evening and 5 in the morning, as though that somehow has a correlation to the virus. But that's it. I mean, we need people to talk the collective off of this ledge that they have been talked onto and pushed onto for some people. What else? I don't know. How do you do it? We'll see if it can be done. But at the end of the day, if you still believe the election process works, it's going to be up to the people to vote politicians into office who they think will be able to implement the plan that the majority of the people want. My genuine fear is that people have now been conditioned to fear freedom. And my fear is that people have been conditioned into living under this tyranny of sanitation, the fear of any virus, the fear of any exposure to anything that might put them at risk today. Because the bottom line is, these are not consequence-free decisions that we are imposing here. You know, protecting yourself at all costs today has a long-term trade-off. Sanitizing a child growing up might have some benefits in the short period of time where you're sanitizing a child growing up, but it has long-term consequences. And, you know, even if we're taking all possible precautions to protect against COVID, unless our only measurement of success in life and in government is COVID deaths, there are trade-offs that we need to appreciate. But my fear is that we've been so conditioned to focus on one and only one criteria, we've lost the perspective of the long-term consequences of these measures, health-wise, for people who are not getting their cancer diagnoses now, cancer treatments now, elective surgeries now, psychologically for the generations to come. Stress and trauma has a physical manifestation of that psychological trauma for our kids growing up. To pretend that all of these measures are consequence-free and justified because they have arguably an impact on one specific unit of measurement, COVID deaths, to pretend that it doesn't have consequences elsewhere is short-sighted to the point of ignorance and naivety. And my ultimate fear is that people have been so traumatized into placing all of their bets on one risk facet that they are ignoring all other risks. Life is a necessarily finite, necessarily limited, and necessarily terminal thing to begin with. And once we have basically sacrificed that which makes life worth living to a very meaningful degree for a sense of security from one thing and one thing only, I think we've lost track of the ball. Is that the analogy? Whatever, that is it. I hope you enjoyed, by the way. If you do like my videos, this one's a little different than most. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section, yada, yada, yada. You know what to do. Support links are in the pinned comment. But above all else, man, make your voices heard. Don't be ashamed to have an opinion. Don't be ashamed to believe what you believe. And don't be bullied into silence, I guess, is the ultimate message. With that, I got to go to a park. Peace.